Remember when kitchens smelled like fresh bread, coffee percolated on the stove, and recipes were passed down on stained index cards? In the 1950s, housewives weren't just cooking. They were running mini science labs of flavor, creativity, and clever hacks that made everyday meals feel magical. From making meat tender without fancy gadgets to baking pies with crusts that never failed, these women knew secrets modern kitchens have completely forgotten. Today, we're opening that time capsule. 30 clever cooking tricks straight from the heart of the 50s that will change how you cook forever. You'll be amazed how simple, smart, and surprisingly effective these forgotten tricks still are. Here's a 1950s kitchen secret that feels almost too simple to matter, but it changed everything about baking. Housewives back then didn't just store their flour, they sifted it every single time they put it away. Sounds obsessive, right? But here's the genius behind it. Constant sifting kept the flour light, fluffy, and oxygenated, ready for perfect cakes and pastries at a moment's notice. No dense cookies, no heavy bread, just soft, cloud-like dough that rose like a dream. They'd often use a metal sifter right over the storage tin, so their prep work was built into their daily rhythm. It wasn't just about baking, it was about being ready for creativity anytime. And wait till you hear the next trick. It involves a pie pan, a little heat, and a touch of pure vintage brilliance. In the 1950s, smart home cooks knew that a flaky, crisp pie crust wasn't just about butter or flour. It was about temperature. Before pouring in their filling, they dipped the pie pan in hot water for a few seconds. Why? That quick burst of heat melted a whisper-thin layer of fat at the base, sealing the crust and preventing sogginess once the filling hit. The result? Golden, bakery-quality pies with bottoms that never went limp. It was the kind of quiet kitchen magic that modern shortcuts have forgotten. Simple, scientific, and wonderfully effective. And it worked with metal pans, ceramic dishes, and even makeshift tins. It's proof that sometimes the smallest ritual makes the biggest difference. But the next trick? It's pure citrus convenience genius. Long before smoothie blenders and energy drinks, 1950s housewives had a secret weapon in their freezer: orange concentrate. A tiny can of sunshine that could instantly brighten anything: glazes, sauces, salad dressings, even cake batter. They'd use it like flavor gold, stirring in a spoonful to wake up a dull roast or to refresh a tired fruit salad. Beyond the bright taste, it was a thrifty marvel, cheap, storable, and always ready when fresh fruit wasn't. Housewives loved how one could stretch across the week, giving them summer flavor in the dead of winter. It wasn't just convenience, it was culinary creativity at its best. And the next trick proves just how far their inventiveness could go, with something as humble as a cabbage. When boiled cabbage turns gray or dull, most cooks shrug, but 50s homemakers had no patience for lifeless color. Their fix was brilliant: a dash of vinegar in the boiling water. The acid kept the cabbage's natural pigment bright and jewel-like, turning an ordinary side dish into a dinner table showpiece. It wasn't just about looks either. Vinegar enhanced the flavor, adding a subtle tang that balanced rich meats and gravies perfectly. These women didn't have fancy plating skills or Instagram filters. They had chemistry. A teaspoon of vinegar turned science into supper, preserving vibrancy with every simmer. And while it made cabbage gorgeous, their next secret made something even simpler: plain toast, crunch like never before. Forget toasters that promise extra crunch. In the 1950s, women had a better way. Before sliding bread under the broiler or into the oven, they'd dust each slice with a whisper of flour. The heat transformed that light coating into a thin, golden shell, sealing in moisture while giving the outside that perfect, crisp snap. The trick wasn't just practical, it was ingenious. It worked on day-old bread, biscuits, or even rolls that needed reviving. Housewives turned leftovers into bakery-fresh perfection with a handful of flour and a little imagination. You could almost smell the butter melting over that delicate crust. And if you think that's clever, wait until you see how they handled croquettes without ever touching a frying pan. In an age when deep frying ruled, some 50s homemakers quietly rebelled with the oven. Instead of dunking croquettes in hot oil, they'd bake them on greased trays until golden and crisp. The secret: a quick brush of melted butter before baking, which mimicked that fried crunch without the mess or smell. The result was lighter, cleaner, and surprisingly satisfying. It was a forward-thinking move that balanced thrift, health, and flavor long before air fryers were a thing. These women knew their way around efficiency. They could turn last night's leftovers into elegant dinner party bites. It's proof that ingenuity doesn't need fancy tools, just a clever touch. And speaking of clever, wait until you hear why saving bacon drippings was practically a religion. In the 1950s, bacon drippings weren't waste, they were treasure. Every breakfast began with that comforting sizzle, and when it ended, the rich, smoky grease was carefully poured through a strainer into a jar or tin, ready for another day. It flavored everything: fried potatoes, cornbread, gravies, even popcorn. The taste was deep, layered, unmistakably home. It was the essence of thrift and flavor in one jar. Housewives didn't need to be told about sustainability. They lived it, one spoonful at a time. That jar by the stove wasn't just grease. It was tradition, quietly passed down from skillet to skillet. They had discovered the secret ingredient money couldn't buy. But in the next trick, they used something far smaller, a pinch of spice, to make sweetness sing. Here's where creativity met curiosity. When making simple white icing, 1950s bakers discovered that a pinch of ground ginger changed everything. The flavor didn't shout, it whispered. Just enough warmth to soften the sweetness, deepen the vanilla, and make each bite linger longer. The result was an icing that tasted complete, balanced, grown up, and impossible to forget. A single spice, and suddenly, dessert became conversation-worthy. It's proof that flavor isn't about excess, it's about subtlety. These women didn't need gourmet recipes or modern mixers. They had intuition and a cabinet full of quiet miracles. Ginger turned sugar into sophistication. But their next flavor secret wasn't found in the spice rack. It came from the bottom of a pickle jar. For most of us, pickle juice ends up down the drain. But 1950s homemakers saw potential in every drop. When roasting meats, they'd use that briny liquid as a secret baste. The vinegar tenderized, the salt seasoned, and the spices added an unexpected tang that made flavors pop. Roast chicken came out juicier, pork richer, and leftovers never dull. Guests couldn't guess what made it taste so alive. It was flavor recycling at its finest. Nothing wasted, everything gained. A splash of pickle juice turned ordinary dinners into something memorable. It was clever, resourceful, and just a little mischievous. But if that surprised you, wait until you hear what they slipped into meatballs. It wasn't breadcrumbs, and it changed everything. Sweet meets savory in one of the most ingenious tricks of the 1950s kitchen. Housewives would grate a small apple right into their meatball mixture. The result? Juicy, tender bites with a touch of natural sweetness that balanced the salt and spice perfectly. The apple's pectin locked in moisture, while its gentle acidity brightened the flavor. No one could ever taste the fruit, but everyone noticed how irresistible the meatballs were. It was kitchen chemistry disguised as thrift, proof that nothing in their pantry went unused. Every grated apple turned humble ground meat into something unexpectedly special. These women didn't follow recipes, they wrote them with instinct. And if an apple could elevate dinner, imagine what they did with something as delicate as icing sugar. Here's one of those secrets that sounds too strange to be true, but 1950s bakers swore by it. When making glossy boiled icing, they added just a few drops of vinegar. That tiny touch of acid broke down the sugar's stiffness, turning a brittle frosting into something smooth, glossy, and easy to spread. It stayed soft longer, too, resisting cracks and dryness that ruined a perfect cake. The vinegar vanished in flavor but worked quietly in chemistry, transforming texture without anyone knowing the trick. Housewives didn't need thermometers or mixers. They relied on instincts and little hacks like this to make perfection look effortless. It's proof that science was always hiding in the kitchen. And wait until you see how they used baking powder for something it was never meant to do. Meringue. Light, airy, and notoriously fussy. But 1950s homemakers had a shortcut that made it foolproof. Instead of relying solely on stiff egg whites, they added a pinch of baking powder before whipping. It gave the meringue an extra lift, locking in air bubbles for that cloud-like texture every baker chased. The result was tall, glossy peaks that held their shape even after baking. It was a quiet revolution in home kitchens, where precision was replaced by intuition and a touch of courage. They didn't always know the why, but they mastered the how. Baking powder, meant for cakes, became a secret for perfection. A little rule breaking, a lot of brilliance. But not every trick came from baking. Some came from the garden, disguised as a flavor swap. Imagine kneading dill for a recipe and finding the jar empty. For 1950s housewives, that wasn't a setback, it was a challenge. They discovered that a few crushed caraway or celery seeds could mimic the herbal sharpness of dill in pickles, soups, or dressings. It wasn't an exact copy, but it fooled the palate just enough to keep the meal perfect. This kind of improvisation defined the era: resourcefulness over rules, flavor over formality. Their kitchens were laboratories of invention, where running out of an ingredient simply meant discovering something new. Every substitution was a lesson in adaptability. Housewives didn't panic, they problem-solved with style. And sometimes their best tricks came not from ingredients at all, but from a simple piece of kitchen hardware. Before spice bags and pre-mixed blends, 1950s cooks had something simpler: the humble tea ball. They'd fill it not with tea, but with whole spices, herbs, or peppercorns, then drop it straight into soups, sauces, or stews. It kept flavors bold, but the broth clear, eliminating the need to fish out soggy leaves or stray cloves later. This little metal globe turned cleanup into an afterthought and gave meals a rich, layered depth of flavor. It was a precision without complexity, elegance born from practicality. You could say it was their version of a flavor infuser, decades ahead of its time. And if that ingenuity surprises you, just wait until you hear what they did with pineapple and roast stuffing. Sweet fruit in savory stuffing sounds wild today, but in the 1950s, it was a revelation. Homemakers mixed crushed pineapple into bread-based stuffing to keep it moist and add a bright, tangy sweetness that perfectly balanced roast meats. The tropical hint cut through the richness of pork or chicken, creating layers of flavor no one expected from a Sunday dinner. The fruit caramelized lightly in the oven, releasing subtle aroma and a golden finish. Guests couldn't always name the secret ingredient, but they always asked for seconds. It was daring for its time, blending sweet and savory long before it became trendy. One small can of pineapple turned a classic roast into something unforgettable. And the next secret? It takes that same cleverness. This time, to create the flakiest pastry imaginable. 1950s homemakers had a way of turning every pie crust into a masterpiece. Their secret? A splash of citrus juice, lemon, or orange mixed right into the dough. The acid worked like a quiet magician, breaking down the gluten just enough to keep the crust tender and impossibly flaky. It also added a faint, fresh brightness that made every bite taste lighter. Housewives didn't talk about food chemistry, they just knew what worked. This was the kind of wisdom passed from mother to daughter, scribbled in the margins of old cookbooks. That single spoonful of juice turned an ordinary crust into a thing of beauty. And if you think that's clever, their next trick made even a bowl of fruit look picture perfect. When it came to presentation, 1950s, women knew color mattered. To keep fruit salads vibrant and fresh, they drizzle in a bit of grapefruit juice. The acidity stopped apples and bananas from browning, keeping everything crisp, glistening, and beautiful for hours. Unlike lemon juice, grapefruit added a subtle, tart-sweet note that didn't overpower the fruit. It was preservation and flavor in one graceful move. Housewives didn't need preservatives or sprays. They had citrus intuition. A dash here, a spoonful there, and dessert looked like it came from a magazine cover. Simple, natural, and ingenious. They found beauty in chemistry without ever calling it that. But the next secret wasn't about sweetness. It was about saving something sharp from spoiling overnight. The 1950s kitchen rarely wasted a thing, not even a half-used onion. To keep cut onions fresh, homemakers had a surprising fix. They'd rub the exposed side with butter. The fat sealed in the moisture and blocked air, stopping that quick, sour spoilage. Wrapped and chilled, the onion stayed usable for days, still fragrant but never harsh. It was one of those quiet acts of kitchen economy that worked better than the plastic wrap ever could. Every bit of food had purpose, and nothing was too small to save. They didn't just cook, they cared for their ingredients. It's a trick that feels almost poetic now. And their next one? It's about keeping onions whole, just long enough to slice them perfectly. Ask a 1950s homemaker how she diced onions without tears, and she'd give you this tiny piece of wisdom. Never cut off the root end until the very last slice. The root holds the highest concentration of those tear-triggering oils, and keeping it intact meant fewer fumes, fewer tears, and cleaner cuts. It was one of those small discoveries that spread quietly from kitchen to kitchen, saving countless recipes and eye makeup alike. Simple, practical, and oddly elegant. It wasn't just about onions, it was about control, patience, and understanding the ingredients like friends. Once you tried it, you never went back. And the next secret? It made ordinary cream taste like something straight out of a dessert dream. 1950s homemakers knew that indulgence was an art form. When they wanted rich, thick whipped cream that stayed firm and smooth, they added a spoonful of instant pudding mix. The starch stabilized the cream, giving it that luxurious, velvety texture that held its shape for hours. Vanilla was the classic choice, but chocolate or lemon turned it into something extraordinary. It was a shortcut that tasted like patience, quick, clever, and foolproof. The pudding didn't just thicken, it deepened the flavor, making even store-bought desserts feel homemade. Housewives didn't waste time, they maximized it, blending speed with sophistication. It was the kind of brilliance hidden in plain sight. But the next trick? It involves muffins, gelatin, and pure creativity. In the 1950s, presentation was everything, even for a simple bowl of Jell-O. Housewives discovered that muffin papers made the perfect molds for individual servings of gelatin. They'd pour the mixture into the papers, chill them on trays, and peel them away to reveal perfectly portioned, delicately shaped desserts. It was efficient, charming, and ideal for parties or picnics. No fancy molds, no sticky cleanup, just clever practicality. Kids loved the fun shapes, adults loved the neatness. It was a small detail that turned a humble treat into something elegant. These women didn't just serve dessert, they staged it like art. And their next secret? It added color, richness, and a taste of summer to every cake they baked. When fresh fruit wasn't in season, 1950s homemakers turned to canned apricots and found pure gold for frosting. They'd mash the fruit into buttercream or boiled icing, creating a smooth, glossy topping, bursting with natural sweetness and color. The apricots added moisture and a soft tang that made even boxed cake taste bakery-made. It wasn't about excess, it was about balance, about knowing how to elevate the ordinary with something simple and sunny. The pale orange hue gave every dessert a warm, nostalgic glow like sunshine caught on a spoon. It's proof that flavor doesn't need to shout to be unforgettable. Their next trick, though, wasn't about flavor at all. It was about clever organization that saved time, space, and sanity. Before labeling systems and plastic bins, 1950s housewives had a smarter way to stay organized: color coding. They'd wrap different meats in colored freezer paper or tie them with different ribbons: red for beef, blue for fish, white for chicken. One glance inside the freezer and dinner decisions were made in seconds. It was efficient, visual, and downright ingenious for its time. Housewives turned simple storage into a coded system of order, long before meal prep became a trend. It wasn't just about convenience, it was about control in a busy, bustling world. Their kitchens ran like well-oiled machines, with creativity tucked into every corner. And next, they'd bring that same planning brilliance to something cold, creamy, and sweet. Entertaining was an art form in the 1950s, but so was efficiency. Instead of struggling with frozen solid ice cream when guests arrived, homemakers pre-scooped servings ahead of time. They'd line a tray with paper cups or wax paper, shape perfect scoops, and freeze them until dessert hour. When it was time to serve, each scoop popped out effortlessly, no waiting, no mess, no melted edges. It turned chaos into grace, allowing the hostess to smile instead of wrestle with a spoon. A simple trick, yet so polished it felt like theater. Every guest got the perfect scoop every time. It was hospitality made easy. And their next secret? It brought even the driest cake back to life, with nothing more than a cloth. When cakes turned out too dry, most people would sigh and start over, but not the 1950s housewife. She'd take a clean cloth, soak it in warm milk or sugar syrup, and wrap it around the cake for a few minutes. The moisture seeped in gently, softening the crumb and reviving the texture without altering the flavor. It was a rescue mission disguised as intuition, and it worked like magic. Guests never knew the cake had been saved at the last minute. This quiet act of perfectionism defined the era: grace under pressure, ingenuity without fuss. They didn't waste, they redeemed. And the next secret? It's a masterclass in precision with a ring of foil and a perfectly poached egg. Before silicone molds and fancy gadgets, 1950s housewives had one of the simplest kitchen hacks imaginable: the foil ring. When poaching eggs, they'd shape a small circle from aluminum foil, float it in simmering water, and crack the egg right inside. The ring kept the whites from spreading, giving a neat, round shape every time. No vinegar, no waste, just a perfect poached egg worthy of a diner breakfast. It was clever, quick, and looked effortlessly elegant on a plate. A trick born of practicality, but remembered for its perfection. Those shiny little rings made even weekday breakfasts feel special. And just when you think they couldn't get more inventive, they started saving something most people threw away: peach stones. 1950s homemakers knew that flavor didn't end with the fruit itself. After canning or slicing peaches, they'd collect the leftover stones and boil them into syrup. Inside those pits was a hint of almond essence, subtle, fragrant, and perfect for drizzling over pancakes, ice cream, or cakes. It was a resourceful way to pull every drop of sweetness from summer's bounty. Housewives didn't waste a thing. They found flavor in the forgotten. The resulting syrup was light, golden, and delicately floral, like bottled nostalgia. It wasn't just thrifty, it was poetic. Every spoonful carried the memory of sunshine and canning days. But when it came to cleaning something as simple as raisins, their brilliance turned even chores into little moments of genius. Before pre-washed fruit and sealed packages, dried goods often needed a little help. 50s homemakers had a quick trick for cleaning raisins. They'd put them in a jar or bowl with a sprinkle of flour, shake it well, and then rinse them clean. The flour absorbed sticky residue and dust, leaving the raisins plump and ready to bake. It was efficient, no fuss, and strangely satisfying. A tiny ritual before baking cookies, puddings, or breads. It's one of those forgotten details that shows just how mindful these women were about every step. Even cleaning became part of the rhythm of cooking. And once the raisins were spotless, it was time to tackle something juicier, with a lemon and a surprising twist of logic. Forget cutting and wasting a whole lemon just for a splash of juice. The 1950s homemaker knew better. She'd pierce the lemon with a skewer or fork, squeeze out exactly what she needed, then store the rest, fresh and unspoiled, for days. It was a perfect blend of thrift and precision, giving control over portions long before zero waste was a concept. The juice stayed sealed inside the peel, protected by nature's own packaging. Smart, simple, and effective. Every drop was used to its fullest, whether in frosting, fish, or lemonade. These women didn't need gadgets. They had ingenuity and a steady hand. And their final trick? It wasn't about cooking. It was about creating the most comforting smell a home could hold. Before plug-ins and air fresheners, the 1950s home smelled warm for a reason. Housewives would sprinkle cinnamon on foil or a baking sheet and place it in a low oven. Within minutes, the air filled with cozy spice, masking kitchen odors and leaving a scent that felt like home. It was subtle, natural, and unforgettable, the kind of fragrance that greeted guests before words did. This wasn't about hiding smells. It was about creating atmosphere, a hint of sweetness, a note of comfort, a sense of care. It turned ordinary afternoons into memory, because for those women, cooking wasn't just about food, it was about feeling. Every aroma told a story. Every trick, a quiet triumph of ingenuity. They weren't just cooking. They were crafting memories, one clever trick at a time. The hum of the percolator, the scent of cinnamon, the quiet pride in a perfect pie. Those moments built homes, not just meals. Maybe it's time we remember their wisdom and bring that warmth back to our kitchens.